The baby's cry cut through the silence of the penthouse suite like a knife. Adriana Santos froze in the doorway, her cleaning cart forgotten. The room was destroyed, furniture overturned, papers scattered, blood smeared across the marble floor. And there, abandoned in the corner, wrapped in a blanket worth more than her life, was a 6-month-old child. She reached for him, and that's when she saw the note pinned to the blanket with a diamond brooch. His name is Leo. They will kill him if they find him. Run. Never come back. This is the only way he survives. The elevator dinged down the hall. Heavy footsteps. Multiple men. Voices sharp with violence. Find the kid. The boss will have our heads if we don't find Gambino's son. Adriana looked at the baby in her arms. At the service door hidden in the wall. At the impossible choice she had 3 seconds to make. She ran. For 5 years, she disappeared. Raised the child as her own in poverty and shadows, always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the monsters to find them. And then one day, they did. The man who walked into the library wasn't a monster. He was worse. He was Detective Marco Rossi, right hand to Frank Gambino, the most dangerous crime boss on the East Coast. The man whose son Adriana had stolen 5 years ago. Mrs. Santos, Marco's voice was calm, but his eyes promised consequences. Mr. Gambino is waiting downstairs. He'd like to meet the woman who's been raising his dead son. Dead son. Frank Gambino thought Leo was dead. Which meant when he discovered the truth, that his child had been alive all this time, hidden by a poor maid who'd kept him from his father, there would be hell to pay. Adriana gripped Leo's hand tighter. The boy looked up at her with those dark Gambino eyes, so much like his father's, and asked the question that would change everything. Mama, who's looking for me? She had no answer. Because the truth was a death sentence. And Frank Gambino was already waiting in the car outside. What happened next would either save them all, or destroy everything she'd built in 5 years of desperate love and borrowed time. The clock was ticking. And Frank Gambino always collected what belonged to him. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you are hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comment section where you are watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you an interesting story such as this one and you don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. 5 years had passed since that rain-soaked night, and Adriana Santos had become someone she barely recognized, a mother. Her tiny studio apartment in the Riverside district was a far cry from the luxury suite where she'd found Leo, but it was home. The walls were decorated with Leo's crayon drawings, mostly stick figures of the two of them holding hands under a smiling sun. A second-hand crib that she'd painstakingly refurbished sat in the corner, though Leo had long outgrown it. Now he slept on a small mattress beside her own, his small hand often reaching out in the night to make sure she was still there. Adriana stood at the kitchen counter, really just a hot plate and a small sink, preparing Leo's breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, and sliced oranges. Simple food, but made with love. She'd learned to stretch every dollar, to make meals from nothing, to turn their poverty into an adventure rather than a burden. Mama. Leo's voice rang out from the mattress, full of the boundless energy that only a 5-year-old possessed. Is it library day? Adriana turned, her heart swelling at the sight of him. Leo had grown into a beautiful child, his dark hair fell in soft waves around a face that was becoming more defined with each passing year. But it was his eyes that always caught her breath. They were unusual, almost black, and held an intelligence that sometimes frightened her. He noticed things other children didn't. He asked questions that had no easy answers. Yes, mi cielo, it's library day, she said, kneeling down to help him with his shirt. But first, breakfast. You need energy for all those books you're going to read. Leo's face lit up. The public library was his favorite place in the world, a palace of stories where it didn't matter that his clothes were second-hand or that his shoes had been repaired 3 times. Mrs. Chen, the elderly librarian, saved special books for him, marveling at how a 5-year-old could read at a 3rd-grade level. Can we get the big book about castles again? Leo asked, bouncing on his toes. I want to draw the towers. We can get any book you want, Adriana promised, kissing the top of his head. She breathed in his scent, baby shampoo and the unique sweetness that was just Leo. Every day, she thanked God or fate or whatever force had brought him into her life. As Leo devoured his breakfast with the single-minded focus he brought to everything, Adriana allowed herself a moment to lean against the counter and simply watch him. She thought about the note she'd found with him that night, the warning that someone wanted to kill him. In 5 years, no one had come looking. No police reports filed for a missing child. No news stories about a kidnapped baby. It was as if Leo had never existed before that night. The diamond brooch she'd taken was hidden in a coffee can under her bed, untouched. She was terrified to sell it, terrified that it would somehow lead them back to her, back to Leo. Instead, she worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and working the morning shift at a small diner, barely sleeping, always exhausted, but never complaining. Leo was worth every sacrifice. "Mama, why don't I have a papa?" Leo asked suddenly, his dark eyes studying her with that unsettling perception. Adriana's heart clenched. They'd had this conversation before, but each time it grew harder. Leo was getting older, noticing the other children at the park with their fathers, asking questions she couldn't fully answer. She sat down across from him, taking his small hands in hers. "Your papa, he couldn't be with us, mi amor. But that doesn't mean you're not loved. You are so loved, Leo. More than all the stars in the sky. Did he want me?" The question was simple, innocent, but it cut like a knife. Adriana thought of the note, of the mother who had given him up to save his life. She thought of the father she'd never seen but whose men had torn apart that hotel looking for his son. Did Frank Gambino want Leo? She didn't know. But she knew what Leo needed to hear. "Everyone who knows you wants you, Leo. You're special. You're kind and smart and brave. And I want you more than anything in this whole world." Leo seemed satisfied with this answer, returning to his eggs with a smile. But Adriana's mind was racing. She thought about the secret she carried, the truth she could never tell him. That somewhere out there, he had a family. A dangerous family, perhaps, but a family nonetheless. The rest of the morning passed in their comfortable routine. Adriana helped Leo dress in his best clothes, jeans she'd bought from the thrift store and a blue sweater she'd knitted herself. She braided her own dark hair, now streaked with gray she couldn't afford to color, and put on the simple dress she wore for her diner shift. They walked hand in hand to the library, Leo chattering about everything he saw, a bird's nest in a tree, a crack in the sidewalk that looked like a dragon, the way the clouds moved across the sky. His imagination was limitless, his curiosity insatiable. Adriana listened to every word, storing these moments away like precious gems. The Riverside Public Library was a grand old building, one of the few beautiful things left in their neighborhood. Inside, the smell of old books and furniture polish greeted them like an old friend. Mrs. Chen looked up from the front desk, her wrinkled face breaking into a warm smile. "There's my favorite reader," she exclaimed in her accented English. "Leo, I saved something special for you. Come, come." Leo ran to the desk, and Mrs. Chen produced a large illustrated book about ancient Rome. Leo's eyes went wide with wonder, and Adriana felt her throat tighten with emotion. These small kindnesses meant everything. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen," Adriana said quietly. "You're always so good to him." The old woman waved her hand dismissively, but her eyes were knowing. "A child who loves books is a gift. Besides, that boy of yours, he's special. I've been a librarian for 43 years, and I've never met a child quite like Leo." There was something in her tone that made Adriana uneasy, but before she could respond, Leo tugged on her hand. "Mama, can I sit in the reading corner?" "Of course. I'll be right here if you need me." Adriana watched Leo settle into the large cushioned chair by the window, the book spread across his lap, his small face serious with concentration. He looked so peaceful, so safe. She wanted to freeze this moment forever, to protect him from whatever darkness lurked in his past. But life had taught Adriana that nothing stayed frozen forever. She was sitting in a chair nearby, resting her tired feet, when a man walked into the library. There was nothing particularly unusual about him, middle-aged, wearing a simple suit, with salt and pepper hair. But something about the way he moved, the way his eyes scanned the room with practiced efficiency, made Adriana's instincts scream danger. The man approached Mrs. Chen's desk, speaking in low tones. Adriana couldn't hear the conversation, but she watched the old librarian's face change from friendly to confused to something that looked like fear. Mrs. Chen shook her head firmly, gesturing toward the exit, but the man persisted. He pulled out a photograph, too far away for Adriana to see, and placed it on the desk. Adriana's blood ran cold when Mrs. Chen's eyes flickered toward Leo. In that instant, Adriana understood. After 5 years of running, of hiding, of building a life in the shadows, they'd been found. She stood slowly, forcing herself to remain calm. Leo was still engrossed in his book, unaware of the danger. Adriana's mind raced through possibilities. The library had a back exit through the children's section. Her apartment was compromised now, they couldn't go back there. She had maybe $300 hidden in her purse, the emergency money she'd been saving for months. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it would have to do. "Leo," she said softly, approaching him. "Mi amor, we need to go." He looked up, confused. "But Mama, I just started reading." "I know, baby, but I forgot something important at home. We'll come back tomorrow, I promise." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. There would be no tomorrow at the library, no more peaceful mornings with Mrs. Chen and her special books. Leo's face fell, but he closed the book obediently. "Can we at least check it out?" Adriana glanced toward the front desk. The man was still talking to Mrs. Chen, but now he was holding up the photograph to show her more clearly. The librarian's eyes met Adriana's across the room, and in them, Adriana saw an apology and a warning. "Not today, mi cielo," she whispered, taking Leo's hand and pulling him gently toward the children's section, toward the back exit. "But I promise I'll buy you a book about Rome. The biggest one I can find." They were almost to the exit when Leo stopped abruptly, tugging against her hand. "Mama, that man is looking at us." Adriana turned. The man from the front desk had spotted them. Recognition flared in his eyes, and he began moving toward them with purposeful strides. Mrs. Chen was frantically trying to stop him, clutching his arm, but he shook her off easily. "Mrs. Santos," he called out, his voice echoing through the quiet library. "Adriana Santos? I need to speak with you. It's about the boy." Panic exploded in Adriana's chest. She scooped Leo into her arms. He was getting too big for this, but adrenaline gave her strength, and burst through the back exit into the alley behind the library. Leo cried out in surprise, clinging to her neck. "Mama, what's happening? Who was that man?" "Hold on tight, baby," she gasped, running down the alley. "Just hold on to Mama." She could hear the door bang open behind them, the man shouting for her to stop, that he just wanted to talk. But Adriana knew better. She'd read that note 5 years ago. She'd heard the violence in those men's voices as they'd searched for Leo. She knew that whatever this man wanted, it wasn't just to talk. She ran through streets she knew by heart, taking turns calculated to lose a pursuer. Leo was crying now, terrified and confused, his small arms locked around her neck. Each sob broke her heart, but she couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. Finally, she ducked into a Catholic church she passed every day on her way to work. The heavy wooden doors closed behind them with a thud that echoed through the empty sanctuary. Adriana collapsed into a back pew, Leo still in her arms, both of them breathing hard. "Mama, I'm scared," Leo whimpered, his face buried in her shoulder. "I know, mi amor, I know," she whispered, rocking him gently. Tears streamed down her face, silent and unbidden. "But I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise. No one will take you away from me." The church was silent except for their ragged breathing and Leo's quiet sobs. Adriana looked up at the crucifix hanging above the altar, at the figure of Christ in his eternal suffering, and sent up a prayer she didn't have words for. A plea for protection, for guidance, for just a little more time with the child who had become her entire world. She thought about Frank Gambino, the name she'd never forgotten, the man she'd never met. Was he looking for Leo because he loved him, or because the boy represented something else? Power? Legacy? Revenge? And more terrifying, if Frank Gambino wanted his son back, what force on earth could stop him? Adriana and Leo stayed in the church for 2 hours, hidden in the shadows of the back pew. When she finally gathered the courage to peer through the stained glass windows, the street outside appeared normal, people walking by, cars passing, no sign of the man from the library. But Adriana knew better than to trust appearances. "Leo," she said softly, wiping the dried tears from his cheeks. "We're going to play a game, okay? A very important game." His dark eyes, red-rimmed from crying, studied her face. "What kind of game?" "We're going to pretend we're spies on a secret mission. We can't go back to our apartment right now. We're going to visit Aunt Rosa instead." Rosa Martinez was another maid from the hotel, the only person Adriana had trusted enough to call a friend in 5 years. "Can you be very brave for Mama?" Leo nodded slowly, though fear still lingered in his eyes. "Are we in danger? Like in the stories?" Adriana's heart broke at how perceptive he was. "Just for a little while, mi cielo. But Mama will keep you safe. Always." They left through the church's side entrance, Adriana clutching Leo's hand as they navigated through side streets toward Rosa's apartment across town. Every footstep behind them made her jump. Every car that slowed made her pull Leo closer. The 30-minute walk felt like hours. Rosa lived on the 4th floor of a crumbling building that smelled of cooking spices and old cigarette smoke. When she opened her door and saw Adriana's face, she immediately pulled them inside without a word. "Dios mío, what's wrong?" Rosa asked in Spanish, locking the door behind them. She was a stout woman in her 50s with kind eyes and hands permanently wrinkled from washing dishes. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Can Leo watch television?" Adriana asked quietly. "We need to talk." Rosa nodded, settling Leo in her small living room with cookies and cartoons. Once he was distracted, the two women moved to the kitchen, where Adriana's carefully constructed walls finally crumbled. She told Rosa everything, about finding Leo, the note, the men searching the hotel, and now the stranger at the library. Rosa listened in stunned silence, her hand covering her mouth. When Adriana finished, Rosa crossed herself and whispered a prayer. "All this time," Rosa breathed. 5 years, and I never knew. Adriana, do you understand what you've done? If this child belongs to who I think he belongs to." "Who?" Adriana demanded. "Tell me, Rosa. What do you know?" Rosa glanced toward the living room where Leo sat, then lowered her voice to barely a whisper. "Frank Gambino. The Grandeur Hotel, the penthouse suite you cleaned, it belonged to him. Everyone who worked there knew, but we didn't talk about it. You don't talk about men like that if you want to stay alive." Adriana felt the blood drain from her face. She'd suspected, of course, but hearing it confirmed made it terrifyingly real. "What kind of man is he?" "Dangerous. Powerful. Ruthless when crossed." Rosa paused, her eyes softening. "But there were rumors, 5 years ago. His wife disappeared, some said she ran away, others said she was killed by rival families. And there was a baby, a son, who vanished the same night. The whole city was turned upside down looking for that child. People died, Adriana. Buildings burned. Gambino was like a man possessed. He searched for Leo." Something in Adriana's chest tightened, not fear, but something more complicated. 4 months. Then he just stopped. Gave up, people said. Went back to his business, colder than before. But you don't give up on your own blood, not really. You just wait. You watch. You prepare. A sound from the living room made both women freeze, but it was just Leo laughing at something on the television, the innocent sound heartbreaking in its normalcy. What do I do? Adriana whispered. I can't give him up, Rosa. He's my son. He's not your son, Rosa said gently but firmly. And you know that. Frank Gambino won't see it the way you do. He won't see love and sacrifice. He'll see theft. Kidnapping. But the note, his mother wanted him hidden, wanted him safe. And now that threat might be gone. Or maybe Gambino decided that having his son in danger is better than not having him at all. Rosa gripped Adriana's hands. Listen to me carefully. You have two choices. Run, take Leo and disappear, spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Or what? Or you face Frank Gambino yourself. Tell him the truth. Beg for mercy. Adriana laughed bitterly. Men like that don't show mercy. Maybe not. But they understand loyalty. Family. You've kept his son alive for 5 years, raised him with love. That has to count for something. Before Adriana could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. Both women froze. The knock came again, harder this time, and a deep voice called out, Mrs. Martinez, I know you're home. I also know Adriana Santos is in there with the boy. Rosa's face went pale. How did they? You need to open the door, Mrs. Santos, the voice continued. It was different from the man at the library, deeper, with an authority that demanded obedience. My name is Detective Marco Rossi. I'm not here to hurt you or the child. But I am here on behalf of Frank Gambino, and this conversation is going to happen one way or another. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Adriana's mind raced. She looked toward the living room where Leo sat, oblivious to the danger. She could grab him, try to escape through the fire escape, but where would they go? How long could she keep running? Mama? Leo's voice called out. Who's at the door? The innocent question shattered her paralysis. She couldn't keep living like this, couldn't keep dragging Leo from place to place, teaching him that the world was full of enemies. He deserved better. He deserved the truth, whatever that might cost her. Stay with Aunt Rosa, Adriana called back, her voice surprisingly steady. Then, to Rosa, if anything happens to me. Nothing will happen, Rosa whispered fiercely. I won't let it. Adriana walked to the door on trembling legs. She took a deep breath, sent up one more prayer, and opened it. The man standing in the hallway was not what she expected. Detective Marco Rossi was in his late 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes that held both intelligence and something that looked like kindness. He wore a well-tailored suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. Behind him stood two other men, bodyguards, clearly, with the hard eyes and bulging jackets that suggested concealed weapons. Mrs. Santos, Marco said, his voice gentler than it had been through the door. Thank you for opening the door. I know you're frightened, but I give you my word, on my honor, that neither you nor Leo are in any danger from me. What does Frank Gambino want? Adriana asked, forcing herself to meet his eyes. To meet his son. To understand what happened 5 years ago. To talk to the woman who saved that child's life. Marco glanced past her into the apartment. He's here, isn't he? Leo? Adriana's body moved instinctively to block the doorway. You're not taking him. I'm not taking anyone anywhere. But Mr. Gambino is downstairs in a car, waiting. He's asking, not demanding, for a chance to speak with you. Both of you. Marco's expression softened further. I know you've spent 5 years protecting that boy. I can see it in your eyes, the love you have for him. Mr. Gambino needs to see that too. And if I refuse? Marco was quiet for a moment. Then he'll get a court order. DNA tests will prove Leo is his biological son. You'll be arrested for kidnapping, and Leo will be taken by child services until custody is determined. He paused. Or you can come downstairs right now, talk to a father who's spent 5 years mourning a son he thought was dead, and maybe, just maybe, find a solution that doesn't destroy everyone involved. Adriana felt tears burning in her eyes. He won't let me keep him. Maybe not. But running didn't work, Mrs. Santos. Fighting won't work. The only option left is the truth. From inside the apartment, Leo appeared at Adriana's side, slipping his small hand into hers. He looked up at Marco with those unnervingly intelligent dark eyes. Are you here because of me? Marco crouched down to Leo's level, his hard expression melting into something genuine. Hello, Leo. My name is Marco. And yes, I'm here because of you. There's someone downstairs who's been looking for you for a very long time. Someone who loves you very much. Who? Leo asked simply. Marco glanced at Adriana, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, tears spilling down her cheeks. Your father, Marco said quietly. Your biological father. His name is Frank Gambino, and he's been searching for you since the night you were born. Leo processed this information with the seriousness of someone much older. Then he looked up at Adriana. Mama, are you my real mama? The question drove a stake through Adriana's heart. Leo, I love you more than anything in this world. You are my son in every way that matters. But yes, you have another family. A family I've kept you from because I thought I was protecting you. From my father? From danger. From people who wanted to hurt you. Leo thought about this, his small face serious. Then he squeezed her hand. I'm not scared if you're with me. Can we meet my father together? Adriana couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She simply nodded. Marco stood, respect evident in his eyes. Mr. Gambino is waiting in the car downstairs. It's a black Mercedes. When you're ready. He stepped back, giving them space. Adriana knelt down and wrapped Leo in her arms, holding him as if she could absorb him into herself and keep him safe forever. I love you, she whispered into his hair. No matter what happens next, I love you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I love you too, Mama, Leo said simply, with the uncomplicated certainty of a child. Will my father like me? He's going to love you, Adriana said, though her heart was breaking. How could he not? They walked down the 4 flights of stairs hand in hand, Marco and his men following at a respectful distance. Each step felt like walking toward her own execution. When they reached the street, Adriana saw it immediately, the black Mercedes, windows tinted, idling at the curb like a sleeping predator. As they approached, the back door opened. Frank Gambino stepped out. He was not what Adriana expected. She'd imagined a monster, a demon in human form. Instead, she saw a man in his early 40s, tall and powerfully built, with dark hair and a face that would have been handsome if not for the hardness etched into every line. He wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than Adriana made in 6 months. His eyes were the same unusual dark shade as Leo's, almost black, intense, and penetrating. Those eyes locked onto Leo, and Adriana watched something extraordinary happen. The hardness cracked. The mask of the ruthless mob boss shattered. What remained was a father staring at his lost son, and the naked emotion on his face, grief, joy, disbelief, love, was so raw that Adriana had to look away. Frank Gambino fell to his knees on the dirty sidewalk, oblivious to his expensive suit, tears streaming down his face. Leo, he whispered, his voice breaking. My son. My boy. Leo looked up at Adriana uncertainly. She nodded, even as her own tears fell. It's okay, mi cielo. It's okay. Leo took a tentative step forward, then another, until he stood directly in front of Frank. Father and son stared at each other, separated by 5 years and a lifetime of missed moments. You look just like your mother, Frank said, his voice rough with emotion. She would have been so happy to see you. So proud. Where is she? Leo asked. My other mama? Frank's face crumbled. She's gone, son. She died to protect you. But she loved you. More than anything. Leo considered this, then did something that broke everyone watching. He reached out and gently touched the tears on Frank's face, as if checking if they were real. "Don't be sad," Leo said softly. "Mama Adriana says that people we love are always with us, even when we can't see them." Frank let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. Then he pulled Leo into his arms, holding his son for the first time in 5 years, and wept like a man who'd finally found what he thought was lost forever. Adriana watched, her heart simultaneously breaking and healing. This was what she'd feared and fought against for so long. But seeing them together, the resemblance unmistakable, the connection instant, she knew that no matter how much she loved Leo, she couldn't deny him this. She couldn't deny him his father. Finally, Frank stood, lifting Leo easily in his arms. His eyes met Adriana's across the few feet of sidewalk that separated them, and she saw the exact moment he truly registered her presence. "You," he said, his voice low and dangerous despite the tears still wet on his face. "You're the one who took him." "I'm the one who saved him," Adriana said quietly, finding courage she didn't know she had. "I'm the one who loved him when he had no one else." Frank's jaw clenched, rage and gratitude warring on his face. "We need to talk. All of us. Get in the car." It wasn't a request. Adriana climbed into the back seat of the Mercedes, Frank settling beside her with Leo still in his arms. Marco got in the front passenger seat, and the driver pulled away from the curb, heading toward a destination Adriana could only fear. The ride passed in tense silence, broken only by Leo's occasional questions about the car, the city, his father. Frank answered each one with patience that seemed at odds with the dangerous man Rosa had described, his eyes never leaving his son's face, as if he was afraid Leo might disappear again if he looked away. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a restaurant, Antonelli's, an upscale Italian place Adriana had passed 1,000 times but never imagined entering. The restaurant was closed, despite it being lunchtime, a private event sign hanging on the door. Inside, Frank led them to a private dining room in the back. A table was set for 4, though Adriana couldn't imagine eating anything with the knots in her stomach. Frank set Leo down and gestured to a chair. "Sit. Please." Adriana sat, pulling Leo into the chair beside her. Frank took the seat directly across from them, Marco standing guard by the door. For a long moment, Frank just stared at them, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice deadly calm. "Tell me everything. From the beginning. And don't leave anything out. If you were Frank Gambino, how would you react to learning your son was alive after 5 years? Would rage or gratitude win? Share your thoughts below." Adriana took a shaky breath and began her story. She told Frank everything, finding Leo abandoned in the hotel suite, the note pinned to his blanket, the men searching frantically, her desperate escape through the service passages. She described 5 years of poverty, of working multiple jobs, of reading bedtime stories and nursing fevers and teaching Leo to tie his shoes. She told him about the diamond brooch she'd hidden away, too afraid to sell it. Frank listened without interruption, his face an unreadable mask. Only his hands betrayed his emotion, clenched so tightly on the table that his knuckles were white. When she finished, silence filled the room like a physical presence. "Show me the note," Frank said finally, his voice rough. "And the brooch?" "They're at my apartment," Adriana said. "I can get them." "Marco," Frank interrupted, not taking his eyes off Adriana. "Send someone to retrieve them. Now." Marco nodded and stepped out, speaking quietly into his phone. Leo, who had been surprisingly patient through Adriana's story, tugged on his father's sleeve. "Are you mad at Mama?" he asked, his voice small. Frank's expression softened as he looked at his son. "I don't know yet, Leo. What she did was complicated. She saved me," Leo said with simple certainty. "The note said bad people wanted to hurt me. Mama kept me safe. She also kept you from me," Frank said, though there was less anger in his voice now. "I spent 5 years thinking you were dead. Do you understand what that means? What that does to a person?" Leo thought about this seriously. "It means you were very sad." "Yes. Very, very sad. But now you're not sad anymore, right? Because you found me. Frank's throat worked as he swallowed hard. Right. Because I found you. A server appeared with food, pasta, bread, salad, though no one had ordered. Frank must have arranged it beforehand. Leo's eyes widened at the feast, and despite the tension, his stomach growled audibly. Eat, Frank said, pushing a plate toward him. You're too thin. Leo looked to Adriana for permission. She nodded, though her own stomach was in knots. As Leo dug into the pasta with enthusiasm, Frank finally addressed her directly. The note said they would kill him. Who was threatening my son? Adriana shook her head. I don't know. Your wife, she didn't sign it, didn't explain. Isabella, Frank said, his voice heavy with old pain. Her name was Isabella. He was quiet for a moment, lost in memory. She came from the Marchetti family, our rivals. Our marriage was supposed to unite the families, end decades of bloodshed. Instead, it just created more complications. She loved him, Adriana said softly, remembering the desperation in that hurried note. Whatever else was true, she loved Leo enough to give him up. Frank's jaw clenched. The Marchettis wanted Leo dead from the moment he was born. A child of both families, they saw him as a threat to their power, a symbol of unity they couldn't control. Isabella must have discovered a plot, must have known they were coming for him that night. What happened to her? Adriana asked, though she already suspected the answer. They found her body in the river 3 days after Leo disappeared. Made it look like suicide. Frank's voice was flat, emotionless, but his eyes blazed with barely contained rage. I knew it wasn't. But without proof, without witnesses, there was nothing I could do except go to war. And I did. I burned the Marchetti empire to the ground. Every business, every alliance, every source of income, I destroyed it all. But it wasn't enough. It couldn't bring back my wife or my son. Leo had stopped eating, his dark eyes wide as he absorbed this information. Someone killed my birth mommy? Frank looked stricken, as if just realizing what he'd revealed to a 5-year-old. I'm sorry, Leo. You shouldn't have to know these things yet. It's okay, Leo said, with the strange wisdom he sometimes displayed. Mama Adriana says sad things happen, but we have to keep being brave and kind anyway. Frank's eyes shifted to Adriana, something indefinable in his expression. She sounds like a smart woman. Marco returned then, carrying a manila envelope. The apartment has been cleared and secured, boss. Here's what we found. He placed the envelope on the table. Frank opened it slowly, pulling out the diamond brooch first. He stared at it for a long moment, his thumb tracing over the jewels. This was my mother's, he said quietly. I gave it to Isabella on our wedding day. She wore it. His voice broke slightly. She wore it the day Leo was born. Then he pulled out the note. His hands trembled as he read Isabella's words, words written in her final moments of freedom before everything fell apart. When he finished, he carefully folded it and pressed it to his forehead, his eyes closed. She knew, he whispered. She knew what was coming and she tried to save him the only way she could. Adriana felt tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for your loss. Frank opened his eyes, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You could have sold that brooch. It's worth at least $50,000. You could have lived comfortably for years. It wasn't mine, Adriana said simply. And I was afraid it would lead someone back to us. Instead, you worked yourself to exhaustion. 2 jobs, barely sleeping. Frank's eyes narrowed. How did you know that? I know everything about you, Mrs. Santos. The moment Marco spotted you at the library, I had a full background check run. Every job you've worked, every place you've lived, every dollar you've spent. He leaned forward. You've never bought anything for yourself. Every penny went to Leo, food, clothes, books. You live in a studio apartment that should be condemned. You haven't seen a doctor in 5 years despite having a chronic cough that suggests possible pneumonia. Adriana flushed, uncomfortable with how thoroughly he'd invaded her privacy. I did what I had to do. You did more than that. Frank's voice softened unexpectedly. You loved him like your own. You sacrificed everything for a child that wasn't yours, expecting nothing in return. He is mine, Adriana said fiercely. Maybe not by blood, but by every day I've spent with him, every tear I've wiped, every story I've read. Love makes a family, Mr. Gambino, not DNA. Fire flashed in Frank's eyes, not anger, but something more complicated. Respect, perhaps, mixed with jealousy. He calls you Mama. Because that's what I am to him. No, Frank said, his voice hardening. You're the woman who raised him. I appreciate that. I'm grateful for it. But Isabella was his mother. I am his father. And it's time for Leo to come home where he belongs. Adriana felt her world tilting. What are you saying? I'm saying this arrangement is over. Leo is my son, my heir. He belongs with me, learning about his heritage, his family, his future. No, Adriana breathed, her arms instinctively wrapping around Leo. You can't just take him. I can, and I will. Frank's voice was steel now, the dangerous mob boss emerging from behind the grieving father. I have lawyers, Mrs. Santos. The best money can buy. I have power, influence, connections. You have nothing. No legal claim, no resources, no chance of winning this fight. I have love. Adriana cried. I have 5 years of being there for him every single day. You can't just erase that. I'm not trying to erase it. I'm trying to do what's right for my son. What's right? Adriana's voice rose, heedless of consequences. What's right is letting Leo stay with the only parent he's ever known. What's right is not traumatizing a child by ripping him away from everything familiar. What's right is... Mama, stop, Leo's small voice cut through her tirade. He was crying now, confused and frightened. Don't fight. Please don't fight. Both adults fell silent, shame-faced. Frank reached across the table, his hand hovering near Leo's but not quite touching, as if afraid the contact might shatter this fragile moment. You're right, son. I'm sorry. He took a deep breath, visibly collecting himself. Mrs. Santos, I'm not trying to hurt him. Or you. But surely you can see this situation is impossible. Leo needs stability, security, a proper home. He has that with me, Adriana insisted, though her voice was smaller now. In a studio apartment in the worst part of the city? Working yourself to death just to afford basic necessities? Frank shook his head. That's not a life for my son. He deserves better. He deserves everything. Everything except the person who loves him most, Adriana whispered. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Frank's face hardened, but before he could respond, Leo spoke up, his voice wavering but determined. Can I have both? Everyone looked at him. Leo wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, looking from his father to Adriana and back again. Why can't I have both a papa and a mama? Other kids have 2 parents. Why can't I? Frank opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly not having considered this possibility. Adriana held her breath, afraid to hope. It's not that simple, Frank began. Why not? Leo interrupted, with a child's clarity cutting through adult complications. You said Mama Adriana kept me safe. You said she took care of me. Don't you want me to be safe and taken care of? Of course I do, but... Then why can't she stay with me? She can live with us. She can still be my mama, and you can be my papa, and we can all be together. Leo's face brightened with the logic of it. That's the best solution. Everyone gets what they want. Frank looked at Adriana, something unreadable in his dark eyes. She stared back, shocked by Leo's suggestion but seeing the wisdom in it. It was impossible, of course. Completely impractical. A poor maid living in the home of a mafia boss? It would never work. And yet, the child makes a valid point, Marco said from his position by the door, speaking for the first time. Leo's adjustment would be much easier with Mrs. Santos present. And it would demonstrate good faith, showing that you value what she's done for your son. Frank shot Marco a look that could have melted steel, but his second-in-command simply shrugged. Just saying, boss. The kid's smart. A long silence stretched out. Adriana could see the war playing out on Frank's face, pride versus practicality, possessiveness versus what was truly best for Leo. Finally, he spoke, his voice carefully controlled. Fine. Here's my offer. You come live in my house, Mrs. Santos. You'll have your own room, full access to Leo, no restrictions on your time with him. In exchange, you'll help him adjust to his new life. Teach him to trust me. Be there for him during the transition. For how long? Adriana asked, afraid of the answer. 6 months. After that, we'll reevaluate based on what's best for Leo. It wasn't enough. 6 months would fly by, and then what? But it was more than she'd had 5 minutes ago, when Frank was threatening to take Leo away completely. I want it in writing, she said, surprising herself with her boldness. A contract. Guaranteeing my access to Leo, my position in the household. I won't just be a guest you can throw out whenever convenient. Frank's eyebrows rose, respect flickering in his eyes. You drive a hard bargain for someone with no leverage. I have the only leverage that matters, Leo loves me. You try to separate us completely, and you'll damage your son. You know that. After a long moment, Frank nodded slowly. Agreed. Marco will draw up the contract. You'll sign it tonight. He stood, still holding Leo in his arms. The child had exhausted himself emotionally and was half asleep against his father's shoulder. We're going to my estate now. All of us. Mrs. Santos, you'll be given proper quarters and anything you need. Tomorrow, we begin the process of integrating Leo into his real life. His real life. The words stung, but Adriana bit her tongue. She'd want a reprieve, a chance to stay with Leo for at least 6 more months. She'd figure out the rest as it came. As they walked out to the car, Adriana caught Marco's eye. He gave her a slight nod, acknowledgement, perhaps, or respect for standing up to his boss. Or maybe a warning about the complicated situation she was walking into. Either way, there was no turning back now. Frank Gambino's estate was like nothing Adriana had ever seen outside of movies. Set on 20 acres of manicured grounds, the mansion rose like a palace against the darkening sky, 3 stories of old-world Italian architecture with marble columns, ornate balconies, and windows that glowed with warm light. Leo, now fully awake, pressed his face against the car window in wonder. Is this a castle? It's home, Frank said simply, and Adriana heard the pride in his voice. You're home now, Leo. The car pulled up to the front entrance where staff members were already gathering, housekeepers, security personnel, all standing at attention as if awaiting royalty. When Frank emerged with Leo in his arms, Adriana saw their faces transform with shock and joy. Everyone, this is my son, Frank announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Leonardo Gambino. He's come home. A gray-haired woman in an elegant dress pushed forward, tears streaming down her weathered face. Master Leo? Is it really? She switched to rapid Italian, her hands clasped in prayer. Maria, this is Leo, Frank said gently. Leo, this is Maria, she was your Nana's housekeeper and has been with our family for 40 years. Maria reached out with trembling hands to touch Leo's face, speaking softly in Italian. Whatever she said made Frank's expression tighten with emotion. She says you look exactly like my mother when she was young, he translated. That God has answered her prayers. Leo, overwhelmed by the attention, reached for Adriana. She stepped forward immediately, and Frank, after a brief hesitation, allowed Leo to transfer to her arms. The gesture didn't go unnoticed by the assembled staff, their curious eyes flickering between Adriana and their boss. This is Mrs. Santos, Frank said, his tone making clear that questions were not welcome. She'll be staying with us. See that she's given the guest suite in the East Wing, the one closest to Leo's room. She's to be treated with respect and given anything she requires. Frank led them inside, through a grand foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than Adriana would make in her entire lifetime. They climbed a sweeping staircase to the second floor, where Frank opened a door to reveal a bedroom that took Adriana's breath away. It was larger than her entire apartment had been. A four-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in cream silk. French doors opened onto a private balcony. A sitting area with plush furniture filled one corner, and another door led to what she glimpsed was a bathroom with marble counters and a clawfoot tub. "This is too much," Adriana whispered. "This is nothing," Frank said dismissively. "Leo's room is next door. Come, I'll show you." Leo's new bedroom was every child's dream, painted in soft blues with hand-carved furniture, shelves already filled with books and toys, and a window seat overlooking the gardens. But the most striking feature was the wall opposite the bed, covered with photographs. Adriana moved closer, her heart catching. They were all of a beautiful woman with dark hair and warm eyes, holding a newborn baby. Isabella and Leo, in the brief time they'd had together. "I had them hung today," Frank said quietly, standing behind her. "I want him to know his mother. To remember where he came from." Leo slipped from Adriana's arms and approached the photos, his small fingers reaching up to touch his birth mother's face. "She's pretty." "She was beautiful," Frank said, his voice thick. "And she was brave and smart, and she loved you more than anything in the world." "Did she sing to me?" Leo asked. "Mama Adriana always sings to me before bed." Frank looked momentarily lost. I don't know. Probably. She had a beautiful voice." "What was her favorite song?" "I can't remember," Frank admitted, and Adriana heard the pain in those words. 5 years had stolen those small, precious details. "That's okay," Leo said with simple generosity. "Mama Adriana can teach you the songs she sings. Then we'll all know them." The casual way Leo included Adriana, the innocent assumption that they would all be together, seemed to strike Frank deeply. He nodded slowly. "I'd like that." A knock at the door interrupted them. Marco entered, carrying a leather folder. "The contract, boss." "As requested." Frank took it, scanning the pages quickly before handing it to Adriana. "Read it carefully. If anything isn't to your satisfaction, we can adjust it." Adriana read through the legal language, her heart pounding. The contract guaranteed her residence in the house for 6 months, unrestricted access to Leo, and a salary that made her hands shake. It was more than she'd made in the past year. "This is too generous," she said. "It's fair," Frank countered. "You're giving up your life, your freedom, to help my son adjust. You should be compensated." He paused. "There's one more clause. Read the last page." Adriana flipped to the final page and froze. In addition to the 6-month guarantee, there was an option for permanent employment, as Leo's full-time guardian and member of the household, with a salary, benefits, and legal protection. "After 6 months, if Leo still needs you, if you've proven yourself loyal and trustworthy, this becomes permanent," Frank explained. "You'll never have to worry about money or security again. Leo will have both his father and the woman who raised him." "And if I haven't proven myself?" Adriana asked, though she could guess the answer. Frank's eyes hardened. "Then you leave with a generous severance package, and Leo stays with me. Permanently." It was a test, Adriana realized. 6 months to prove she deserved to stay in Leo's life. 6 months under the watchful eye of a man who had every reason to resent her existence. "I'll sign," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Marco produced a pen, and Adriana signed her name at the bottom of the contract. Frank signed as well, his signature bold and decisive. Just like that, her fate was sealed. "Leo needs to sleep," Frank said, looking at his watch. It's been an overwhelming day for all of us. I'll put him to bed, Adriana said automatically. We'll both put him to bed, Frank corrected, and there was steel beneath the suggestion. Together, they helped Leo change into new pajamas that had been laid out, silk, expensive, so different from the worn cotton Adriana had bought from thrift stores. They tucked him into the massive bed, and Adriana began her nightly routine, singing softly in Spanish, a lullaby her own mother had sung to her decades ago. Frank watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. When she finished and Leo's breathing had evened into sleep, she moved to leave, but Frank caught her arm gently. Wait, he said quietly. We need to talk. They moved to the hallway, closing Leo's door softly behind them. Frank studied her in the dim light, and Adriana fought the urge to fidget under his intense gaze. I need to understand something, he said finally. Why did you really take Leo that night? The truth, Mrs. Santos, not the story you told yourself. Adriana considered lying, offering the simple explanation about maternal instinct and doing the right thing. But something about this moment, about the vulnerability she'd seen in Frank tonight, demanded honesty. Because I was lonely, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I'd given up everything to come to this country, my daughter, my family, my life, and I had nothing to show for it except calloused hands and an empty apartment. When I found Leo, when he looked at me with those eyes and reached for me, I felt needed again. Important. Like my life had meaning. She met Frank's eyes, unflinching. So yes, maybe I was selfish. Maybe I took him partly for me. But I also loved him, Mr. Gambino. From that very first moment, I loved him with everything I had. And I spent 5 years proving that love every single day. Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, his expression softened. I understand that, he said. More than you know. When Isabella died, when I thought Leo was dead too, I had nothing worth living for except revenge. My entire empire, all my power and money, it was meaningless without them. He paused. You gave him a life. A childhood. Things I couldn't have given him if I'd found him right away, not in the state I was in. Are you saying you're grateful? Adriana asked, not quite believing it. I'm saying it's complicated. I'm furious that you kept him from me. But I'm also... He struggled with the words. I'm glad he had you. That he wasn't alone. That someone loved him the way he deserved to be loved. Adriana felt tears prickling her eyes. I just want what's best for him. Then we want the same thing, Frank said. He extended his hand. Truce? For Leo's sake? Adriana looked at his offered hand, the hand of a dangerous man, a criminal, someone from a world she didn't understand. But also the hand of a father who loved his son, who'd wept at finding him, who was trying to do right by a complicated situation. She took his hand. Truce. As they shook, something shifted between them, not trust, not yet, but the possibility of it. A fragile alliance built on shared love for one small boy sleeping in the next room. Frank released her hand and stepped back. Get some rest, Mrs. Santos. Tomorrow, the real work begins. Leo needs to learn about his heritage, his family. And you need to learn how to survive in my world. Is it really so dangerous? Adriana asked. Frank's smile was grim. More than you can imagine. The Marchettis may be broken, but there are always others who want what I have. Others who would use Leo to get to me. Which means keeping him safe is now the most important job I have. He paused. And like it or not, that job now includes keeping you safe too. With that ominous statement, he turned and walked down the hallway, leaving Adriana standing alone in the shadows, wondering what she'd truly signed up for. The first month passed in a blur of adjustment. Leo thrived in his new environment, private tutors, music lessons, the finest toys and clothes. But the boy Adriana had raised in poverty remained unchanged in the ways that mattered. He still preferred the library books she read to him over expensive gadgets. He still reached for her hand when scared. Frank watched them constantly, his presence both protective and unsettling. He was teaching Leo about the family business, carefully edited versions, of course, but Adriana saw the truth in the men who came and went, in the hushed conversations that stopped when she entered a room. She was living in a gilded cage, and the bars were getting tighter. Everything changed on a cold November evening. Adriana was reading to Leo in his room when shouting erupted downstairs. Frank's voice, harsh with fury, and another man's, older, speaking rapid Italian. She heard the name Marchetti and her blood ran cold. Marco appeared at the door, his face grim. "Mrs. Santos, take Leo into the safe room. Now." "What's happening?" "Just do it." He grabbed her arm, pulling them both down the hallway to a hidden door she'd never noticed. Behind it was a reinforced room with supplies, communications equipment, and weapons mounted on the walls. "Stay here until someone comes for you," Marco ordered. "No matter what you hear, don't open this door." He sealed them inside before she could protest. Leo clung to her, his eyes wide with fear. "Mama, what's wrong?" "I don't know, baby. But we're safe here." She pulled him onto her lap, holding him tight, listening to the chaos beyond the walls. Gunshots. Shouting. The sounds of violence that penetrated even the reinforced door. Leo buried his face in her chest, whimpering, and Adriana sang to him, the same lullabies she'd sung in their tiny apartment, when the world was simpler and the only danger was not having enough money for groceries. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time became meaningless in that sealed room. Finally, the door opened. Frank stood there, blood on his shirt, his face carved from stone. But his eyes were wild with barely controlled rage and fear. "You're both okay?" he demanded, his gaze sweeping over them. "We're fine," Adriana said. "What happened?" "The Marchettis. A cousin I thought was dead, come to finish what they started 5 years ago." Frank's hands clenched into fists. "They got past our security. They were in the house, heading for Leo's room when..." His voice broke. He looked away, composing himself. "It's over now. They're gone. But this isn't going to stop, Adriana. As long as Leo is here, he's a target. As long as you're with him, you're a target too." The use of her first name, the raw emotion in his voice, it shook something loose in Adriana's chest. "Then what do we do?" she asked quietly. Frank looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something that terrified her more than the gunshots had: defeat. "I've been thinking about this wrong," he said heavily. "Keeping Leo here, raising him in this world, it's selfish. It's what I want, not what's best for him." Adriana's heart stopped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe you were right to hide him. Maybe he's safer away from me, away from all of this." Frank's voice was raw. "I want to be his father. God, I want that more than anything. But wanting it doesn't make it right." He walked to them, kneeling down so he was eye level with Leo. "You need to go away for a while, son. Somewhere safe, where bad men can't find you." "Without you?" Leo asked, his voice small. Frank's face crumpled. "Without me?" "No." Leo threw his arms around his father's neck. "I don't want to go. I just found you. You can't send me away." Frank held his son, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Over Leo's head, his eyes met Adriana's, and she saw a father's anguish, the impossible choice between love and safety. Adriana made a decision. "There's another option," she said quietly. "We all leave. All 3 of us. You, me, and Leo. We disappear, somewhere far from here, somewhere your enemies can't reach." Frank stared at her. "I can't just abandon my responsibilities, my family business." "You can't abandon your son either," Adriana interrupted. "What's more important, Mr. Gambino? Your empire or Leo's life?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Frank spent 3 days in meetings with Marco and his other lieutenants, making arrangements Adriana wasn't privy to. She watched him grow more exhausted each day, the weight of his decision aging him. On the 4th day, He came to her room late at night. She was awake, staring out the window at the moonlit gardens, unable to sleep. "I've made my choice," he said without preamble. "We leave in 2 days. New identities, new life, completely off the grid. Marco will run things here." Adriana turned to face him, searching his expression. "You're really doing this? Giving up everything?" "Not everything." Frank moved closer, and in the moonlight his face was softer than she'd ever seen it. "I'm choosing what matters. 5 years ago, I lost sight of that. I let revenge and pride consume me. I won't make that mistake again." "Leo will be happy," Adriana said. "Having both of us, somewhere safe." "Both of us," Frank repeated, his gaze intense. "Do you understand what that means, Adriana? We won't just be 2 people raising a child together. We'll be a family. We'll be presenting ourselves to the world as a unit, as parents, as partners." Adriana's breath caught. "I understand. Do you?" He stepped closer still, close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the silver threading through his dark hair. "Because somewhere along the way, over these past weeks, watching you with Leo, seeing your strength and your compassion, this stopped being just about my son." Her heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't know how to do this, be a father, be a normal person. I've been a criminal my whole life. But you make me want to try. You make me think maybe I could be someone better." "Frank." "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know I'm asking you to give up your independence, to tie your life to mine and Leo's. I just need you to know that you're not just the woman who saved my son. You're—" He struggled for words. "You're important. To both of us." Adriana felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "You're important to us too." "To me too." The admission hung between them, charged with possibilities neither was quite ready to explore. Frank reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped the tears from her face. "Then we do this together," he said softly. "All of us. A real family." Adriana nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Frank leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, not romantic exactly, but intimate, full of promise and hope in the beginning of something neither could name yet. "Get some rest," he whispered. "We have a long journey ahead of us." The night before they were set to leave, everything went wrong. Adriana woke to the sound of Leo crying. She rushed to his room and found it empty, the window standing open, curtains billowing in the cold wind. Her scream brought Frank and half the security team running. But it was too late. Leo was gone, taken through the window while they'd all believed the house was secure. Frank became a man possessed. "Lock down the estate. Check every camera. I want to know who took my son and where they are right now." Marco was already on the phone, calling in every favor, mobilizing every resource. Adriana stood frozen, her mind unable to process the nightmare unfolding around her. This was her fault. If she'd never taken Leo that night 5 years ago, if she'd left him for the police to find, maybe he'd be safe now. Maybe. "Stop," Frank's voice cut through her spiral. He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I know what you're thinking. This is not your fault. Do you hear me? But if I hadn't. If you hadn't, Leo would have died 5 years ago. You saved him then, and we're going to save him now." His voice was steel and fire. "I need you focused, Adriana. You know Leo better than anyone. Think, if he's scared, if he's in danger, what would he do?" Adriana forced herself to breathe, to think past the panic. "He'd try to leave a trail. He loves stories about clever heroes. He'd find a way to help us find him. Then we look for his trail," Frank said. He turned to Marco. "Where are we on the security footage?" "Got it, boss." Marco pulled up images on his tablet. "Black van, no plates. But look, something's being dropped from the window as they drive away." They zoomed in. Small objects, falling at regular intervals onto the driveway. Leo's marble collection, Adriana whispered, her heart breaking and soaring at the same time. He keeps them in his pocket. He's leaving us a path. Frank's face transformed with fierce pride. That's my boy. Marco, get cars. We follow those marbles. What followed was a chase through the city streets, Frank's men tracking the trail of marbles while calling in aerial surveillance and traffic camera footage. The marbles led them to the old dockside warehouse district, abandoned, perfect for hiding a kidnapped child. This is a trap, Marco warned. They want you to come. I know, Frank said calmly, checking his gun. And I'm going to give them exactly what they want. Not alone, Adriana said firmly. When both men looked at her in surprise, she raised her chin. Leo needs to see both of us. He needs to know we came for him together. Frank studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right. But you stay behind me, and you do exactly what I say. Understand? They moved through the warehouse like shadows, Frank's training evident in every careful step. Adriana's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst, but she kept moving forward, kept thinking about Leo scared and alone. They found him in a room at the center of the warehouse, tied to a chair, tears streaming down his brave little face. Standing behind him was an older man Adriana didn't recognize, a gun in his hand. Vincent Marchetti, Frank said, his voice deadly calm. I thought I killed you 5 years ago. You killed my son, the old man spat. My nephew. My entire family. Now I kill yours. An eye for an eye, Gambino. Let the boy go. Your fight is with me. No. My fight is with everything you love. Vincent's eyes shifted to Adriana. This one too? The poor maid who stole your son. Oh yes, I know the whole pathetic story. She's going to watch him die, just like you watched your Isabella die. Please, Adriana begged, stepping forward despite Frank's warning hand. He's just a child. Whatever hatred you have, he doesn't deserve this. Neither did my son, Vincent said, his voice breaking. But Gambino killed him anyway. Burned him alive in his own home. Because he killed Isabella. Frank roared. Because he murdered my wife and tried to murder my child. What did you expect me to do? I expected you to die. Vincent screamed, pressing the gun to Leo's head. Everything happened at once. Frank moved with lethal speed, his own gun coming up. Marco burst through a side door with 2 other men. And Leo, brave, clever Leo, threw himself sideways in his chair, giving Frank a clear shot. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Vincent Marchetti fell, his gun clattering across the concrete floor. Frank rushed forward, catching Leo's chair before he hit the ground, frantically untying the ropes. You're okay, Frank kept repeating, his hands shaking as he freed his son. I've got you, Leo. You're safe now. Adriana fell to her knees beside them, wrapping both of them in her arms. Leo sobbed against her chest while Frank held them both, his face buried in Leo's hair. I was so scared, Leo cried. But I knew you'd come. I knew Mama and Papa would find me. Those simple words, Mama and Papa, said together as if they'd always belonged that way, broke something open in both adults. They held Leo between them, held each other, and let the tears flow freely. The nightmare was over. Vincent Marchetti was dead, the last of the threats against Leo eliminated. They were free, truly free, to build the life they'd planned. 6 months later, a family of 3 lived in a small coastal town in Northern California, far from the violence and chaos of East Harbor. The house was modest but beautiful, white clapboard with blue shutters, a wraparound porch, and a yard where a 6-year-old boy played with a golden retriever puppy. To their neighbors, they were the Castellanos, Frank, a writer working on his memoirs, Adriana, a former teacher, and their son Leo, who attended the local elementary school and was the brightest student in his class. No one knew that Frank still maintained contact with Marco, who ran the legitimate businesses Frank had left behind. No one knew about the substantial but carefully hidden fortune that ensured they'd never worry about money. No one knew that the quiet man who coached Little League and attended PTA meetings had once been one of the most feared criminals on the East Coast. They only knew that the Castellanos were a loving family who'd moved to town for a fresh start, and that their son Leo was polite, smart, and clearly adored by both his parents. Adriana stood on the porch, watching Leo play fetch with the puppy, a birthday present from Frank, who'd finally admitted that every boy needed a dog. She felt arms wrap around her waist from behind, Frank's chin resting on her shoulder. "Happy," he murmured against her ear. Deliriously, she admitted, leaning back against his solid warmth. Over the past months, their relationship had evolved from co-parents to something deeper. They'd grown together, learned each other, fallen in love slowly and sweetly like normal people did. Last week, Frank had proposed, nothing flashy, just the two of them on the beach after tucking Leo into bed, his voice nervous as he asked if she'd consider making their family official in every way. The ring on her finger now caught the sunlight, a simple band that meant more to her than all the diamonds in the world. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The power, the respect, the—" "Not even a little," Frank interrupted firmly. "I have everything I need right here. A son who's safe and happy. A woman I love more than I thought possible. A real life, not just existence between violent acts." He turned her to face him. "You saved me, Adriana. Not just that night when you took Leo, every day since. You showed me what actually matters." "We saved each other," she corrected, touching his face gently. "And we saved Leo. Mama. Papa." Leo came running up, the puppy bounding beside him. "Can we go to the library? Mrs. Henderson said they got new books about ancient Egypt." Adriana and Frank exchanged amused glances. Some things never changed: Leo's love of books, his insatiable curiosity, his ability to find joy in simple things. "Of course," Adriana said. "Go wash up first." As Leo ran inside, Frank pulled Adriana close, pressing a kiss to her forehead, then her nose, then finally her lips, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too," she replied, and meant it with her whole heart. Inside, they heard Leo singing to himself, one of the Spanish lullabies Adriana had taught him, his voice pure and happy and free. The sound of a child who felt safe, who knew he was loved, who had two parents who would move heaven and earth to protect him. Frank had walked away from his empire, from everything he'd built, and found something infinitely more valuable. Adriana had risked everything to save one abandoned child and discovered that love multiplies rather than divides. There was enough in her heart for the boy she'd raised and the man she'd grown to love. They were no longer the poor maid and the Mafia boss, the stolen child and his biological father. They were simply a family, imperfect, unconventional, but bound together by choices made in moments of crisis and reaffirmed every day through small acts of love. As they walked into town together, Leo between them holding both their hands, Adriana thought back to that rain-soaked night 5 years ago when she'd made the most reckless decision of her life. She'd expected nothing but wanted everything: a purpose, a family, a reason to matter. She'd found all that and more. The past couldn't be changed: Isabella's death, Frank's crimes, the years of separation and fear. But the future stretched ahead of them, bright with possibility. Leo would grow up safe and loved. Frank would continue his journey of redemption. And Adriana would finally have the family she'd always dreamed of. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with romance but with a single act of compassion: a frightened woman choosing mercy over safety, a desperate mother sacrificing everything to save her child, a hardened criminal learning that some things matter more than power. Their story had begun in darkness and violence, but it would end in light and love and the simple, profound joy of coming home. If this story touched your heart, moved you to tears, or made you believe in second chances, please hit that subscribe button. We create emotional stories like this every week, tales of love, redemption, courage, and the beautiful messiness of being human. Your subscription helps us continue bringing these powerful narratives to life. And who knows? The next story might be exactly what your heart needs to hear. Subscribe now, and let's continue this journey together. Because everyone deserves a story that reminds them they're not alone.